Hi there and welcome to this webinar brought to you by PQ Magazine. PQ Magazine, if you don't already know, is the student's champion, and it's well worth subscribing so you keep up to date for all things that accountancy trainees need to know. My name's Sean Purcell. I work with the ACCA as an expert tutor. I've helped over 10,000 people past SBL. I've worked with the education and examining team for over 30 years. And I just want to share some of that experience with you, with particular focus today on the pre-C material for the September 2026 SBL exam. So in terms of what I am going to look at here, to begin with, I'm going to explain to you how you should be using the pre-C material. Not everyone uses it correctly, so we'll just get clear on that. In part two, I will then take the pre-C and go into quite a bit more detail on it, and we'll talk about some of the terminology and what's going on and what to look out for. And then in the final part of this webinar, I want to share with you some really useful resources that are going to help you give the best possible account of yourself in the ACCA SBL exam this October. Okay, let's get started then. So in part one, I want to talk about how to use the pre-C material. The pre-C material, how do we use it? Well, probably the first question to ask would be, what is the purpose of the pre-C material? And the purpose of the pre-C material is so students have familiarity with the industry and have familiarity with any terminologies used in that pre-C documentation. If you are not that sure what the purpose of it is, I have recorded a video for the ACCA. You maybe might want to spend 5 minutes looking at that, but I assume most of us know what the purpose is. But if you want to look at that video, you can find it on this web link. So what I want to look at now is the second part, which is a detailed discussion of the information that is available in the pre-C, and we're going to go through it sequentially, step by step. So hopefully you have a copy of the pre-C information with you. You can obviously download that. Here we have chapters of what it contains, and in the first page it explains that Hasper World is a theme park. It makes a distinction between a theme park and an amusement park, in that amusement park just contains rides, whereas in a theme park, the park is set up to represent a theme. If you want to try and picture this and visualize this, think about Universal Studios, where they have a kind of Spider-Man area, or they have a Harry Potter area. Yep, as opposed to just plain old rides. In the UK, we have something called Peppa Pigland. Yes, that's obviously targeted at young kids. It then talks about, at the bottom there, talks about D-Land, it talks about the market, talks about this market, or D-Land having 60 million people. It generates $1 billion in revenue, and it's going to grow 10% over the next few years. And that's going to be helped by global leisure and tourism. Yep. If we then look at page 2, on page 2, it talks about the fact that there's a wide range of theme parks in D-Land. It talks about the fact that HW is in the top 3. There's Space Park and Dino Land. They're not just competing against other theme parks. They're competing against other attractions like castles, like zoos and things like this. But in terms of the market growth drivers, which I'm going to talk about this a little bit later about market growth, but what is driving market growth? Well, disposable income increase is driving growth, the growing popularity of themed entertainment, and also the increasing adoption of technology. So maybe we will have a little think about technology in theme parks and visualize what's going on. In case you're not familiar with rides, it then goes on to describe the difference between a roller coaster, a flat ride, a drop ride, a dark ride, a water slide, and playgrounds. Then talks about the visitors, and talks about how they're segmented. So we could see that almost 50% are teenagers, 13 to 19, or young adults. And then adults only over 30 only make up 9%, but the big majority is families. So the first thing I'm thinking, going back to the previous page 3, is how these different customers embrace technology and the different types of technology each of them might use. We need to be able to visualize that and think about that, because that's definitely something that is, relevant in the growth of theme parks. At the bottom, it talks about revenue generation, and over on page 5, it gives a breakdown in the various types of revenue that are generated. Most of the revenue, about 60%, is generated by ticket sales, 20-ish% by food, and then 12% by hotels, and 7% by merchandising. This is, again, the figures for the whole of the theme park industry in D-Land. Yep. It then below that talks about challenges. So questions are always going to probably be inspired by market challenges. They have economic swings, although the economy is doing pretty well at the moment. They've also got health and safety pressures to make sure that, the standards of health and safety are kept high. What else? They've got food hygiene issues in case, someone gives you a bad burger. They've got climate. So when it's raining, breaks are not so good. So they've got challenges of, rainy days making the place not so popular. And also over the page, it talks about how customers are interested in sustainability. So maybe we need to give some thought to sustainability in theme parks. And I'll definitely talk about that in a moment. Over on page 6, it talks about the latest developments in the theme park world. It talks about digital and mobile technology. So apps on your phone, think about how we could use those. I'll talk about those in a moment. Wearable, it talks about radio frequency identification devices. Originally, they used to use those in warehouses, but you can put a wristband on customers, and we're going to think about the potential that they might have. Holiday resorts attached to theme parks. Again, it talks about international visitors. It is good if we've got a hotel they can stay in, and also other technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality. And you may have been to theme parks where they make you put a virtual reality head mask, which you put on your face, and that is timed with a roller coaster. So all of those kinds of things going on. And on page 7, it talks about some key performance indicators: revenue per visitor, visitor numbers, visitor attendance growth rate, safety incident, net promoter score. You might want to think how you can grow those areas, because that's definitely something that could come through in the exam. So we'll have a little think and a bit of visualize about that. There's also the Organisation for Amusement Park Operators, which acts as like the industry regulator. It does check things and inspect things to make sure everything is okay. So there we have the industry in general. And what we then need to do is we need to contextualize Hasper World in that industry. So it talks about Hasper World being invented 50 years ago. It's a family-owned business. What else? Well, they're a theme park that is themed on historical legends. Yep. And it also doesn't have an on-site hotel. So we talked before about the expansion of international visitors. Well, Hasper World might not be able to maybe embrace them as well as others that have a hotel on site. Also on page 8 at the top, it says HW is the only privately owned theme park operating in D-Land. So what would the difference between maybe a theme park owned by shareholders or private equity companies and a theme park run by a family? Talks about the seasonality. Although it's warm, it does rain sometimes. So the park really opens March to October. Talks about tickets. Most of them are pre-booked. And once you get inside, everything's free. But you've got to pay for food and drink and merchandise and stuff like that. And then it talks about ownership. and how the business is owned. 20% is owned by the founders, 50% is owned by the current board, and then another 30% is owned by non-business active family members. So it then talks about a bit of an industry structure. So I'm going to come back here and talk a little bit about governance, because definitely we should be prepared to talk about governance, and let me try and contextualize governance in the pre-scene here. And then it talks about operations and staffing, and although it has 100 full-time staff, most of the staff in this business are seasonal workers, and 80% are aged 18 to 25. So you might want to think about that. The maturity of those people, the experience of those people. It also talks about health and safety. So maybe there's a connection there. We have to look at that. It talks about how the ride operators are responsible for managing and operating the rides and checking the rides. So yeah, there's issues there. We might want to think about health and safety, how we can improve it. And again, I will talk a little bit about that in a moment. It then talks at the top of page 10 about IT and how it has a website, has mobile apps. So obviously we need to think about how we manage IT, the threats to IT, cybersecurity, the benefits of IT. We'll have a little look about that. And then, as we have to study risk for SBL, it does give a risk report highlighting safety. Obviously, if something crashes, that will be a big deal. We need to keep up with everyone else, so we need to innovate. We need to make customers happy. We need to be aware of what competitors are doing. And we also need to think about technology and cyber security. And then it talks a little bit about the climate as well, like weather systems impacting the safety, but also a little bit about environmental things and how could we be more environmentally sustainable in a theme park. Then talk specifically about the website, on the website about the mission, the vision and the values. So make sure you look at that, because there might be things suggested and we would be looking at whether they fall in line with those visions and missions. And then finally, we have some figures. Figures are presented in a graph as they have been over the last few exams. And we can see that revenue for HW is growing, revenue per visitor is growing, visitor numbers are growing. But when we put them in the context of the industry average, we can see that HW is not doing as well. The industry average year on year visitor attendance is growing higher. The visitor number market share of HW is falling, and the net promoter score in 25 is definitely lower than the industry average, meaning that people visiting HW are less likely to recommend the park. So let's now explore some of those themes and just help you contextualize them in the world of theme parks. Okay, let's have a look at some of those things we mentioned there before to see how we could contextualize them in a theme park and in the context of HW. So the first one we talked about was governance. Now, it's a family-owned company, 20% with the founders, 50% by the board, and 30% by non-involved family members. So if it's a family business, corporate governance is all about agency issues where the owners and the management are separate. But in this case, they're the same people. So if the managers cock up, they lose all their money. But there are 30% of people who are not involved in the business. So there is a bit of a governance from their perspective. I'd also think about how I could improve governance. If we had people outside who were not family members, I think they could give better input. Just because of you've got a bloodline doesn't mean you would be an expert in cybersecurity or in health and safety or anything like that. So I think that could definitely help. And I think if I brought independent directors in who had specialisms in areas where the management team were maybe weak, that would definitely be helpful. So from a governance perspective, you might say as a family business, there's no governance issues. You definitely could improve the governance of the business, both for the non-involved family members and also the business in general, for it to be more prosperous. What about strategic performance issues? Well, they were kind of explained, and customer advocacy, net promoter effect wasn't good, competitive pressures was going up. Were they as innovative as some of the others? We weren't sure. It seemed maybe they weren't. And also technology was something that people were very much in tune with. So they were some strategic performance issues, which led to their competitive position becoming weaker. So if we're looking at strategic performance issues, how could we solve them? And this is where I want you to get yourself into a theme park. Think about what theme parks do to make more money out of you. But we'll contextualize it also with HW. So they have to continually invest in new attractions. If you look at all the theme parks wherever you live, they do bring out new rides, new attractions to bring people in. We could use technology to make the visitor experience just a more modern one. We could maybe think about building a hotel. They don't want to build a hotel, but yeah, we should maybe think about building a hotel. Merchandise revenue, have all the things like Harry Potter broomsticks and limited edition merchandise. You can make a lot of money on merchandise, not in the context of theme parks, but rock bands touring now sometimes make almost half their money out of merchandise, selling a t-shirt for 50 quid. So yeah, it's a theme. It's something people are into. Let's try and get some good merch, limited edition merch. Do photographs of people on rides, videos of people on rides to, have a memory and charge them. We've all seen, getting 5 photos for whatever it costs, quite a lot. But yeah, people buy them. Maybe you can get a priority pass. Maybe you can get in half an hour early for a fee. All of these things are what theme parks do. These could all be valid suggestions you could make. Special events like fireworks night, like Halloween, maybe like Christmas, which, you charge extra for, and people will come. And then also think about not just a daily visit, think about season tickets, think about half price for, tomorrow. All of those things go on in real theme parks. They could be things that could be revenue generating. You could mention. Yeah, there's other things you could have done with regards to food. I think, can't you get unlimited sodas in parks and things like that? Drinks, vouchers, pre-booked food vouchers, loads of ways to make money. What about cyber benefits to start with? I'm going to look at the drawbacks, but if we invest in IT, we could maybe have more efficient queue management, reducing queue frustration. RFID, we could work out customer flows. We could maybe open, close gates so that people flow through our theme park more efficiently. We could think about, food. Maybe there's a deal comes through on your phone. If you get a burger at this restaurant, it will be cheaper. So therefore, there's not a queue at another restaurant. Personalized things to families, to individuals, to time of day. All can be done through apps on a phone with like limited time benefits. Also, when we understand about customer flows, we understand about which rides people go on, which rides people go to first. We can understand much more about how to manage people in the park better. So IT would give us all of those benefits. However, there could be some risks. It did mention that IT was kind of critical on the systems, therefore vulnerable to ransomware and operational disruption. People may purposely, or there might be a technical problem with systems which could close the park down. Visitor safety, it could compromise safety of rides. Also, if customers are giving us our data, we have a duty to look after that data. So, think about big data analytics, think about the dangers of holding data on customers and the drawbacks. Yep. What about mitigating any kind of IT risks? Well, access controls, it's all straight out of your kind of learning, but needs to be applied in the context of HW. So access controls, training of people to understand the cybersecurity issues, have secure backups, have kind of penetration testing where you employ people to try to crack the system. Should we open a hotel? You might get asked to open a hotel. In my mocks, all of these things I've written mock questions on. Probably for some of you when you're reading this, that will all be closed. I'm running a mock this Friday and Saturday. I might, if there's demand, I might run another one on Sunday, but at the moment, I'm just running it on Friday and Saturday. So we could open a hotel. How do we assess whether we open a hotel? Is it suitable? Is it feasible? Is it acceptable? Yep. So we think about that. Sustainability, that's a big deal. What do you know about sustainability and theme parks? Well, renewable energy of rides, energy efficient rides and facilities, better water management. They've got a water park. Do they use the water better? Do they rainwater harvest things? What about reduction of waste? Do they recycle waste? Do they have refillable cups? Food waste, what do they do with it? Does it power the rides? All of these kinds of things, and maybe have some measurable environmental KPIs, all in the context of a theme park. Other risks, seasonal staff risk, you've got temporary staff, you've got the risk of health and safety, how well trained are these people, you've got technology risk, we've already mentioned, competitor risk, we've got climate and weather risk. So we have these risks, and then we talk about how we mitigate them through risk registers, through assigning responsibility to specific people for the risk, develop a risk appetite with HW, have regular risk reporting. All of these would help in the mitigation of risk. I also wrote a mock question on HR issues, integrated reporting, applying it in the context of a theme park, and also what if there was a disaster at a major theme park in the UK, there was a roller coaster crash, and how would you deal with that disaster, and how would you communicate it, that kind of thing. So all of those are just a little bit of food for thought. They're not exam tips, but they're things that I have included either in mock or in suggested questions where I've given full answers. So just get your mind thinking in theme park world. What else can I suggest you do? Well, do a mock to time, really important. And, when I do these reviews of what I think might come up and I write mocks, you can check me out to see whether they actually do have any relevance. Look at what happened in June 2026. I did a YouTube video before, and then you can compare what actually came up. If you think I got lucky, have a look in March 2026. Sorry, there's a typo there. And then the same thing happened again. Pretty much everything in the mock came up again. Yep. So think about that. What else? Follow my posts on Instagram. One thing I think I'd post, I don't go looking at lots of theme park companies, but one company is called Merlin Entertainments. They own Alton Towers, they own Chessington World of Adventures, they own Sea Life, they own Thorpe Park. They're all over the world. But if you have a quick flick, not a detailed dig, but a quick flick, you'll see about their issues. They report on sustainability, on health and safety, on staff happiness, kind of integrated reporting things, sustainability things. Definitely worth a look. Have a look at LinkedIn. The interesting thing about LinkedIn, you can follow me on LinkedIn, but if you don't interact with me, LinkedIn probably won't send you all my posts. So it's always worth making a comment or a like or something like that, just so LinkedIn thinks you're interested, and it will keep sending you the posts. Even if you follow, LinkedIn does some funny things. And in case you did miss LinkedIn, I have a weekly newsletter that I send out to students. It's normally topical for the time in which it's sent out. So obviously at the moment, it will be talking about, exam stress techniques and stuff like that. It's free. All of these things are free. I spend a bit of time doing them. Doesn't cost you a penny. So have a go. So that's it, guys. I hope that's helpful. Don't stress too much about the pre-scene. Hopefully I've given you some food for thought. My main concern for you now, if you're well prepared, is have some mitigating actions should you panic in the exam. Have a look at a little bit of mindfulness. Have a look at some box breathing. Do all of that. You'll be absolutely fine. Thanks for listening, and all the very best.